All right, I'm back. So in the last video, I kind of introduced the drill and the driver, talked about some of the differences between them and what the tools are called. One thing I forgot, I told you guys that this piece on the drill is called the chuck. The chuck holds the bits. I completely forgot to talk about this side. All right, so this little piece on the front of the driver is also called the chuck, except this one just works a little bit different than the drill. So the drill has a really, really big chuck on it that has to hold really, really big bits. The driver chuck is really small, and it holds like smaller kind of screwdriving bits. Because the driver is meant to drive screws. All right, so in this video, what I want to do, show you guys how to actually change bits, so how to use the chuck. And then I want to show you how to actually drill a hole in like this small little piece of scrap wood. And then we'll switch over to the driver. And I'll show you guys how to drive screws and why we actually use the driver versus the drill. All right, so to start, we're going to take a look at the chuck on the drill. All right, so when you look closely at the chuck here, I'll try to get it in the video. There's actually three little kind of prongs that are sticking out of the top of the chuck. As I spin the chuck, you'll see those prongs are getting tighter and tighter. They're kind of like claws, right? They're like claw closing in on something. So if I'm trying to put a bit in, like a really big bit, I need to spread those claws. So I'll spin the chuck until those claws are spread out. Spread out. I'll take my bit, I'll insert it into those claws, and then spin them back until the claws rip in. Okay? I want to make sure it's super, super tight. So right now, that bit is in there. Okay? So here's the safety rule number one. When you're changing a bit, it's really important that you don't hold the bit. All right, so what I'm doing right now is extremely dangerous. You'll notice my finger is not on the trigger. If I were to pull the trigger right now, that bit spun with my hand on it, it would carve up my hand, which is obviously not very smart. So safety rule number one is when you're changing a bit, you always want to hold the chuck and not the bit. You'll see people, they'll hold the chuck, and I do this all the time. They'll hold the chuck, and they'll actually pull the trigger. When I hold the chuck, they'll loosen those teeth for me. So you'll see if I just hold it and pull the trigger real light, you can see those claws start to come out. My biggest fear, why this safety rule is important, that kids are going to go like this, hold the bit, and then pull that trigger to tighten those teeth. And that's a big problem, right? It'll start slicing up my thumb, and it'll slice up my hand. These are meant to go through wood, so they'll tear through fingers. You'll see I'm not holding the bit, I'm just holding the chuck. Okay. All right, so that's how you change a bit using a drill chuck. I am going to actually change to a much smaller bit here. Little tiny bit. I can use it to put a screw in this little board here. I'll show you guys how to do that. So holding the chuck, making sure it's nice and tight. All right. So let's talk about using the drill safely on a board. So I have a small little piece of scrap wood. I'm going to put a hole in this through this board, this other piece of scrap wood. All right. So safety rule number one is that you're always going to want to use a piece of scrap wood that you don't really care about underneath your project when you're drilling a hole. All right, we don't want to drill into like our tables or like through the board into nothing, because there's a chance that you might be a dum-dum, put your hand underneath the board like this while you're screwing. And I can only imagine you guys are smart enough to figure out why that's a safety problem, right? You never want your hand underneath the board. And just to eliminate the possibility of that happening, put a piece of wood underneath, right? The other thing that will happen is if you put a piece of wood underneath the piece that you're screwing, you won't get something called blowout, right? When this piece of metal, the bit gets through the wood, a lot of times the wood wants to splinter out, right? Like it blows out the back. But if you have another piece underneath, you won't get that blowout. So kind of like a dual safety. One, you'll avoid blowout on the back of the wood. It splinters, it would look bad. And two, putting the board underneath will discourage you from putting your hand underneath, so you don't drill into your hand. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this clamp. I'm actually going to clamp both my piece to my like safety board, and then to my table. All right, and the reason I'm doing this is because when I start drilling into this piece of wood, the bit is spinning really fast, right? It's spinning. So this wood, if it's not clamped down and I'm not holding it, the piece of wood's gonna want to spin. Right? And if it's spinning and that's spinning and things are just flying all over the place, that's really dangerous, right? It could go flying off my drill and hit somebody else or myself. We always want to clamp our pieces down so the wood doesn't spin. All right, so now that I'm ready to drill, what I'm gonna do is actually start with my bit on the spot that I want to drill. Now, normally, we never start tools on the piece of wood. But in this situation, it's going to be spinning way too fast for us to accurately get our hole in the piece. When we're drilling it, it needs to be very precise, right? We don't want screws just in random spots. So with the drill, it's actually totally okay to put that drill bit in place and then start drilling. All right, so I'm making sure that my button here on the side is on my finger side because I'm going forward. I don't have my hands underneath at all. It's clamped down. I'm ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and start it on my piece. And I'm going to pull the trigger very slowly, right? If I go my pressure sensitive trigger, if I pull the trigger all the way, it's going to go way too fast. It could actually slide off the board and hit my hand. So that's another safety rule for you guys. We're going to pull the trigger very slowly with it starting on our piece. Pulling slowly. I'm applying some pressure. I'm pushing down. Okay, so now I'm at the bottom of the board. I'm switching my button to my thumb side, right? And I'll pull my trigger slowly to back drill bit out. All right, so I'll try to show you guys what I did there. I don't know if you can tell, there's a small hole in that board. So just to review real quick, we're clamped down. We're not putting our fingers next to the drill bit. We're starting with the drill bit on the wood. We're pulling our pressure sensitive trigger very slowly. All right, let's move on to the driver. So we talked about the chuck on the drill. The driver, the chuck is really easy. The driver bits, so they kind of look like screwdrivers, have this little indented end. All we're gonna do is take the chuck here, pull it out a little bit. You can kind of see it moves back and forth. So we'll pull it out. We'll take that indented side, put it in, and then let go of the chuck. Cool. Look at this. There we go. So now it's in there secure. Right? So the screw driving bit is meant to put screws into the holes. And I'm going to start drilling this hole, and I want you guys to listen to the sound it makes. All right, I'm going to do the exact same kind of thing I did with the drill. So I'm going to put my screw in. I'm going to start with the drill bit, or the screw bit in the screw. I'm going to pull the trigger really slowly and apply some pressure. I want you guys to listen to the sound it makes. Okay, so right there at the end, you kind of heard that stuttering sound, right? It almost sounds like a machine gun or like a motorcycle engine, right? It goes stutters, all right? And what's actually happening is that the driver, it has a built-in function that lets it kind of stutter. All right, what's happening is that drill bit stops spinning. No matter how hard I pull, the drill bit will stop spinning. And the reason we like that, the reason we use the driver instead of the drill, that the screw will cross on the screw. If it didn't have that stutter, if it didn't stop, the screw would get stripped, which means that cross will no longer be there. And if that happens, we'll never get the screw out or never get it in any farther than it is. If we strip the screw is permanent then. So the driver has that stutter built in, so we can control how much pressure is going on the screw. The drill doesn't, right? If I tried to put the screw driving bit in the drill would just go straight through the screw and tear out that cross. All right, so there is a huge difference. The drill is only used for making holes, right? Never for screws. The driver is only used to drive screws, right? It's a mechanical screwdriver. That's why it's called driver. It's never used to make holes. All right, so these videos should act like your notes, right? This is like your lesson. know it's not as exciting as listening to me lie. Maybe, I don't know. But these videos, I want you guys to watch these videos. Take notes of all the safety rules I talked about, the different parts, how to use the chucks, the names of the different bits. All right, these are all things that are going to show up on a quiz on Friday. Friday morning, we'll try to do a really, really quick review, but I also want to give the kids that are here time in the shop to work on the project. All right, so please, please, please watch these videos, take notes, be prepared for the quiz Friday. All right, I'll see you guys